Wildest dreams. John raised the lantern up above his head, trying to work out what the source of the noise was. What he saw in the wan light made him wish that he hadn't. The moans were coming from a young woman, surely not more than 20 years old at most. She was dressed in a friar's robes, or what was left of them. Her garments were slashed open at the stomach, as if they'd been torn apart by a thresher's scythe. She was swaying back and forth like she was drunk or about to faint, her face white as a sheet, and her eyes wide and wild like those of a mad dog. She had a woodcutter's axe in one hand, waving it back and forth like it was a poppet she was using to ward something off. Her other arm was clutching her torn garments to her belly, trying to hold something in. John felt a trace of sick in his mouth as he stared at the grisly sight. People had told him not to come here. He should have bloody listened. The woman locked eyes with him, as if seeing him for the first time, even though he was the only one here. He tried to say something, but his mouth was so dry nothing would come out. For a split second, he thought the apparition would speak, but at that moment the wind blew fierce and whipped his lantern back and forth like a terrier with a rat in its mouth. When the light returned, the woman had gone. John looked around, but there was no sign of her anywhere. Just the looming houses on either side of the street, a row of black, empty tombstones that stared back at him impassively. "Fuck this," he hissed, and started to back away. Green iron there may be, but he was going to need a different plan to get it. Overview. As Empress Lisabetta noted 3 years ago, the town of Sarkham in Southmoor has a long history as a rich centre of commerce. Located in Southmoor, a rich mining region in the south of Mornwald, since receiving their charter, the prosperity of the town and the Mornwald as a whole have gone from strength to strength. The boom benefits everyone. Farmers can be assured of getting the best possible prices for livestock and grain that are sold in Sarkham, while merchants who buy here can pick and choose the best victuals produced in the Mornwald, or find hungry markets for the fine goods produced by the cities of the League or imported from far-off lands. Thus, Sarkham's good fortune is a riding tide that lifts all ships. People are beginning to speak of Sarkham as a rival for Mead, and the Mornwald as an equal in prosperity and importance to Mitwold. Perhaps the time has come to realise that potential. There may be Jotun in Liathaven again, but for many there's a quiet certainty in Sarkham that they will not have as easy a time conquering the Mornwald a second time, not with Fast Rider's Watch and Landkeeper's Bulwark waiting for them. The Black Canal. Funds have been donated to begin building a canal between Mead and Sarkham. Work cannot begin in earnest until supplies of white granite and weirwood are found. Money has been flooding in from far and wide to support one of the most ambitious projects ever undertaken in the Marches, the construction of the Black Canal. A number of Imperial citizens have donated money in support of the project, and not all of them are Marchers. There has also been support from the Orcs of the Mornwald. Despite the recent strangeness, some of them are clearly fascinated by the scale of the project, and the more prosperous have thrown their full support behind it. They've donated money and food, and there are also young orcs turning up to labour alongside the human workers to do actual work of digging out the canal. Their presence has raised a few eyebrows in southern Midland and Upwold, especially given the situation in Bregersland. Yet even the most traditional marcher can't deny that not only do they work hard, but they also know how to relax. Humans and orcs both encounter new proverbs and new ways of swearing at a recalcitrant ditch. There's nothing like sharing punishing physical labour whilst up to your waist in mud and freezing water to break down barriers between people, apparently. Once the work starts in earnest, it should do wonders to cement relationships between the two groups. However, thus far, no real construction has been possible due to the shortage of materials. The canal needs lots of white granite and weirwood, and apart from a little preliminary work, there is little that can be done without them. Sadly, therefore, no significant progress has been made yet in linking Mead and Sarkham, but there is certainly a will there if the materials can be found. The New Town. Any ministry commissioned in Sarkham before the end of Autumn Equinox 385 YE will cost 2 wains and 4 crowns less than normal. The existing town hall could be expanded and become the seat of the alderman of Sarkham. It would require a commission and cost 20 wains of white granite, 5 thrones, and take 3 seasons to complete. The alderman of Sarkham would receive a seasonal income of 18 crowns. The Chestnut Cartel of Sarkham would provide a regalia for the alderman of Sarkham. Sarkham's rise to prominence has been slow but sure. It is 3 years now since the Empress granted the residents a charter, and each year has seen the town grow. There is a shortage of houses, but no shortage of work to be done. Signs in many shop windows offer opportunities for those prepared for hard work. Merchants from Tasato and the Brass Coast are common visitors, and occasionally a trader from as far afield as Varushka or Highgard may be spotted in the markets haggling for fine metals at the metal market. This confluence of enthusiasm and ambition has produced a number of opportunities, but perhaps more importantly, what it really creates is potential. Sarkham has become a fertile ground for trade and investment. The right citizen with the right idea could take advantage of these circumstances if they had the wherewithal. For the next year, any Imperial Senate commission which creates a ministry in Sarkham will need 2 wains of Bourse material less than normal and 4 crowns less than normal to construct. As trade grows, the office of the town clerk is beginning to struggle, especially with an increasing number of folks from outside the marches come to town to trade. The Chestnut Cartel, a wealthy group of merchants specialising in lumber and street food, suggest that the Senate could create the title of Alderman of Sarkham, who would be responsible for organising trade with foreigners in order to fund marcher projects. Such an esteemed position, with a weighty responsibility, would need to be recognisable in Anvil, and so the Chestnut Cartel have offered to provide some regalia in the form of a chain of office. Of course, such a respected position would need to have an equally respected set of offices. The current town hall is decidedly lacking. The civic building did not receive the care and upkeep it deserved during the occupation of the Jotun. Folks are not after anything fancy, but the existing structure needs to be significantly enlarged if it is to manage the many demands now being placed upon it. Enlarging the existing town hall would mean the Alderman of Sarkham would receive a substantial income of 18 crowns from fees and licenses granted to foreign traders looking to ply their wares in Sarkham, in addition to a cut of the payments made by visitors looking to use the expansive town hall as a meeting place. The Alderman of Sarkham would be a national title of the marches, appointed by the tally of the votes each year. The only issue is that the title holder would need to be an alderman. If the title was held by somebody who wasn't widely recognised as an alderman, then the income of the sinecure generated would be halved, and the Chestnut Cartel would withdraw any offer of regalia. The Old Forest. The Forest of Alderley offers a source of wealth to the Mournwold. If the job of clearing the forest were begun, then after a year the resulting pasture would support a 5th Marcher army. The Marchers can support its army at the moment, but the loss of any more territory would cause all 4 to begin deteriorating. Clearing the forest would need a lumber yard and sawmill that cost 20 wains of weirwood, 5 wains of mithril, 50 crowns in labour, and take 3 months to complete. The forests of Alderley are old. Sycamore and oak reach almost 100 feet into the sky, and the ground is almost entirely covered by dense foliage. Forest paths often seemingly lead in circles, and the trails are only known to those who spend much of their life underneath the canopy. There is a wealth in the forest, though, a plethora of herbs that can be harvested. With the fenny having been cleared out by the drakes, there is now a chance for the marchers to make full use of the bounty available. When the Senate commissioned an appraisal of the Mournwold Orcs last summer, Naomi of Virtue's Rest identified that if the woods were cleared, then it would grant the marchers the ability to recruit and support a 5th Imperial army. As the trees were felled, marcher folk would quickly move in and begin farming. The land would be ideal for raising herds of cattle, sheep, or goats. It would take many years to clear the entire forest, but whilst it was being actively cut, it would produce potentially prodigious amounts of fine and hard woods, along with boosting the supply of the entire territory. That could be timely, as right now, the Jotun controlled Bregasland. The strong reeds by all accounts are running rings around the invaders, both the orcs and the would-be tyrant Matilda Fisher. There's talk of imminent rough music like the creator themselves has never seen, loud enough to drive the Fishers and all their ilk back west forever. But in the meantime, there are orc armies on the threshold not only of the Mournwold, but also Midwold. The only thing between the Jotun and Mead is the marshes of Oddmire. There's Jotun massing in Leathaven as well, and the last time that happened, the Mournwold fell. Nobody thinks it will happen again, but then nobody really thought the Jotun would ever conquer Bregasland. All of this raises the problem that nobody seems to want to talk about, but which must be addressed, the matter of supporting the Marcher armies. Bregasland is not especially wealthy as a territory, but no part of the Marches is poor. The eel farms, fisheries, and wetland acres of the Dower Fens help support the 4 Marcher armies, and now they are in enemy hands. There's enough support for the armies to keep them functioning at full strength right now, but the nation is ploughing a risky furrow. If the Marchers lose control of one region of either Upwold or Midwold, or 2 regions of Mournwold, then they will not be able to support their armies. If this happens, then all 4 will begin to deteriorate due to a lack of supplies, and soldiers more worried about protecting their homes than fighting in an army. The breadbasket will certainly help, and presumably the keeper would have a good sense to ensure it goes to supporting the Marcher armies first and foremost. But even then, all that can do is slow the decline of the armies, not stem it altogether. It probably won't come to that, but it might. Naomi's original assessment of the Alderley clearance was that it would allow the marchers to support a fifth army. With that much support, they could afford to temporarily lose a little land to the Jotun if they had to, and in the time it took to get it back, the marcher armies would be fine, so long as they didn't actually lose another territory. Or they could just get to working raising another army and damn the Jotun to their faces. Either works. But while the clearance of Alderley would eventually allow the support of a fifth army, there is a problem, namely the time involved to turn enough of the forest into pasture. After the commission were completed, it would take a further year before the marchers would be in a position to support a fifth army, a year that might be too long with Jotun armies massing on the borders. There might be other ways to clear Alderley faster, however. As long as the soil isn't ruined in the process, it might be possible to reduce the amount of time before the marchers can support another army, but such things would probably require significant magic, and most likely the aid of an Eternal would be required, and finding a suitable Eternal, most likely in the autumn or winter realms, and negotiating an acceptable bargain will be a challenge. Success could mean that enough of Alderley were turned into farmland in time for the support it would grant to be helpful in the current situation. New Longstwick Market. With the Fenny having been driven out of Alderley, there is a chance to organise herbalists in the nearby villages. The village of New Longstwick have offered to help organise a monthly market for the trade of foraged herbs. Constructing the market would require a commission, 12 wains of weirwood, 3 thrones in labour costs, and take 3 months. The bailiff of New Longstwick would be able to purchase herbs at the market at set rates. New Longstwick Market would decrease in efficacy if the Alderley woods were chopped down. The village of New Longstwick is only an hour away from the border of the forests. Its inhabitants are a sight more welcome than their neighbours, who it was often said had more than a little trace of Fenny blood. The village steward suggests that if the Senate were to construct a market for the purchase and trade of goods from the forest, then it would encourage foragers and gatherers to venture in and return with goods to trade. Such a market would need to be based in a suitable location, such as the village green of New Longstwick, and would cost 12 wains of weirwood, 3 thrones, and take 3 months to finish building. The farmers of the marches would need to appoint somebody to oversee the market, bailiff of New Longstwick perhaps, through the tally of the votes, and they would be able to purchase a variety of herbs from the market at set rates. What's more, in some of the deepest parts of the forests, herbalists have come across a tiny amount of rare realms fruit. Why it would grow there is a mystery, but there's enough of it to ensure a regular supply, so a few doses might find their way to the bailiff's office. If the woods of Alderley were ever destroyed or cut down completely, then the ministry available to the bailiff would continue to function, but less herbs would be available to purchase. The Deep Mine. New rich veins of ore have been identified deep beneath the Singing Caves. Exploiting the new veins requires the construction of a deep lift costing 10 wains of weirwood, 20 crowns, and 3 months of work. Once complete, the holder of the Singing Caves would have access to a ministry, allowing them to purchase additional wains of mithril. Nobody involved entirely agrees on exactly how Jonah Gold led a handful of miners to a deep bounty hidden beneath the Singing Caves. Many of them disagree as to whether or not it was actually Jonah Gold himself, or some other poor lost miner looking to discharge some unfinished business so they could move on. All agree that the necromantic enchantment that has been lain over the Mormord for the last 3 months is almost certainly the cause of the ghostly visitation. Regardless of how exactly it happened, the fact remains that rich new veins of ore have been discovered beneath the Singing Caves. The problem is that they are very far down, further than any similar shafts in the marches. Accessing them represents a significant problem, but so does finding miners prepared to risk the inky depths and stifling air down at the bottom of the world. The first problem can be addressed by the Imperial Senate. A suitable lift could be created. It's a reasonably straightforward piece of engineering. Such an elevator would represent a folly requiring 10 wains of weirwood, 20 crowns in labour, and 3 months of work. If it were constructed, however, the amount of mithril ore that could be extracted from the caves would be greatly increased, provided the bore seat holder was prepared to pay the price. Exploiting the deep veins is expensive because it requires additional equipment and skilled miners prepared to risk the various dangers of working so far underground. However, Sarkham's swelling population offers a solution, creating the potential for the holder of the Singing Caves to hire more workers simply by paying competitive wages. With enough cash, the holder of the Singing Caves can attract miners from across Mormord, or maybe even from Karaman and Tasato. There is one complication related to the way Bourse resources are handled by the civil service. In the season that the seat is appointed, autumn in the case of a mithril mine, it is the new holder of the seat, rather than the incumbent, who receives the mithril produced in the previous 3 months. This would continue to be the case with the Singing Cave's additional production. There would be nothing to stop the seat holder financing the deeper delves following the summer solstice, but they would essentially be gambling that they would be able to keep the title. Otherwise, the additional mithril would go to the new title holder. The civil service have looked into it and say that, while it is legally odd, the law is quite clear. The Vivid Scar. A mining outpost could be built to service the mine near the abandoned settlement of Whittle. The mining outpost would require a commission and cost 20 wains of mithril, 5 thrones in labour costs, and take 3 months to construct. The ganger of Green Iron Hill would gain access to a ministry to purchase green iron. With the Whittle situation now firmly dealt with, now is the time to look to the future. The abandoned village of Whittle sits at the bottom of Whittle Hill, the site of a very rich green iron mine. John Miner has investigated and confirms that nobody is prepared to dwell in the accursed settlement, given what a bad end they all came to. However, he claims it is a shame to leave good iron in bad ground, so he's drawn up plans for a new mining outpost on the other side of the hill, far away from all that bad business, and proposes to change the name to Green Iron Hill. That way, everyone can begin to move on. The foreman of the mine, ganger of the Green Iron Hill, would have access to a ministry that would allow them to offer incentives to miners working the veins and receive ingots of green iron. It would be possible for the ganger to receive ilium if they paid enough. The ganger of Green Iron Hill would need to be appointed by the farm owners of the marchers through the tally of the votes, and would serve in the position for a year. The traitorous son. Stephen of Sarkham remains at large. There is one particular blight that casts a shadow over the prosperity of the marches and the reputation of the Newmarket town. Stephen of Sarkham and Izigara continue to fight for the Jotun. It rankles that a scion of the Mormord, a former inhabitant of Sarkham no less, leads a sizable warband of young folks who should by all rights have been marchers in service of the enemy. His hatred of the Empire appears entrenched. Several times over the last year he's used his knowledge of how imperial society works to strike vicious blows against it. Active in the recent Karaman campaign, he led a major force during the conquest of Riota, and by all accounts instigated the scheme to ruin the roads in Karaman. Right now it seems his people are working with the fishers in Bregasland, helping to sway the hearts and minds of the Bregas folk. The death of his partner Wildest during the spring equinox has done nothing to quell his hatred. He seems absolutely committed to doing whatever it takes to share his pain with the people of the Western Empire. For many people of the Morn, he and his followers are a painful reminder of the Jotun occupation, groups of traitors who strike at the heart of what it means to be a marcher. There are many from Sarkham in particular who would welcome the death of the man who has become their town's most notorious resident. If his death could be proved by cutting off his head and delivering it to the marcher Egregore, then she will convey word of the traitor's end back to the Mornwold. His demise will likely seriously damage the morale of his Yagara troop, perhaps to the point that some of them at least may be brought back to the Empire. Perhaps just as importantly, it will relieve some in the Mornwold of the shame they feel at his betrayal of the nation and the Empire. While Stephen himself is not active in the marches at the moment, his influence can still be felt. Your obedient servant. Conjunction. Little Robin is a sympathiser to Stephen of Sarkham and is attempting to travel to Liathaven. If they make it to the border, then they will pass on information to the Jotun. The Bailiff of the Downs is responsible for stopping Little Robin from reaching Liathaven. Not all folks who live in the Morn are worried about the Jotun retaking Liathaven. A small number who sympathise with Stephen of Sarkham would actively welcome the Orcs' return. One miner from Green March, Little Robin Erskine, has gone a step further. They abruptly abandoned their home and started making their way to the border with Liathaven. More worryingly, a witness says that someone matching their description has met up with a force of Jotun Orcs who appeared to be expecting them. Little Robin is apparently quite influential among some of the miners of the Morn, and has maintained a network of close friends and confidants across Green March. There is no doubt that they plan to put their knowledge of the area at the disposal of the Jotun. If the miner is able to make it across the border, then the Jotun will be able to use that information to reclaim the region much easier. Green March would gain the under threat quality. The escorts of Little Robin are made up of a combined force of Rajalost, Ulvenvar, and Skjalda. Given that this represents a threat to the well-being of the entire Mornwold and the farmers therein, it is the responsibility of the Bailiff of the Downs, Hob Culloch, to stop Little Robin from reaching Liathaven. The Riches of Sarkham. Conjunction. A raiding party led by Jarl Hyglac the Quarrelsome has ventured into the Mornwold. They have attacked a merchant travelling to the Sarkham metal market. The Jotun are likely to be accompanied by a number of heralds of Cath and Canai. The Master of Sarkham Metal Market is responsible for rescuing Wise Maggie and intercepting the raiding party. In addition to Stephen himself, the human traitors who form his warband represent a threat to the Mormort. A week or so ago, a party of beaters tracked down a raiding party of Jotun, led by Jarl Hyglac the Quarrelsome, that slipped over the border from Leathaven. It seemed that the Orcs were working with a couple of Igara, raised in southern Mormold, and looking to secure as many ingots of metal as possible, most likely as raw materials for magic items. They have already slain 2 patrols that tried to intercept them. The beaters who located the force were able to kill the Yagara leading them, so it's likely the Orcs will head back home shortly. Unfortunately, they're looking to take one last prize with them as they go. It seems they're close on the trail of a merchant named Wise Maggie who managed to evade capture when their guards were killed. Wise Maggie is a veteran of the Sarkham Metal Exchange, and likely to be carrying a significant amount of metal on their person. The Orc force is primarily made up of Ulfar and supported by a number of heralds of the Lady of the Frost. Given that this directly threatens the safety of the metals stored for the market, it is the responsibility of the Master of Sarkham Metal Market, currently Millward Cowley, to rescue Wise Maggie and the intercepting raiding party.